So, it's finally my turn to talk. My name is Arai Shoji. I'm in the 2nd grade. Everyone, do you like movies? I love them. I especially love French films. European films are great. The images are beautiful, poetic, and it's like my heart is being cleansed. How about you, Kurata-san? Do you like French movies? I do. You do? For someone else here to also enjoy French films. That's right. French films choose who watches them. Even for me, someone who greatly enjoys film, there are probably only 2 or 3 other people who understand their poetic world. That means that you are one of those all-important people. By the way, are there any other types of films you enjoy? Science fiction and horror. You like science fiction and horror, huh? You have some pretty cheap tastes. I don't really like those types of films. They have no class whatsoever. The subject matter is so fake. They just rely on visuals to scare you, and there are too many special effects. But movies really are scary. I'm not talking about horror movies. Movies themselves. Don't you think so? In the past, people used to claim that photos stole people's souls, right? People laugh it off as a superstition now, but in the past, they believed it very seriously. Each photo shortened your lifespan, and if you took a photo with 3 people, the person in the middle would soon die. Stories like that. People couldn't help but find photos strange then. Your figure could be trapped in a single piece of paper. It's just like magic. That's why everyone was scared. Movies are exactly the same. When movies first came to life, they were amazing. Like, in movies you can see someone turn and shoot a gun at the screen, right? And then the viewers who are watching think that they're going to be killed and pass out. Everyone who was watching those on the other side of the silver screen thought that people were living their own lives on the other side, and they were watching their world. Although nobody thinks that way anymore these days. But was that really a lie? Was their way of thinking really just imaginary? I don't necessarily think so. Film occasionally captures things that it shouldn't. Strange things that shouldn't exist. I can't help but think that film might possess some sort of magical power. The story I'm going to tell you now is about a movie just like that. There was a guy in my class named Tokita Yasuo. He had an unparalleled love of film and often spoke to me about movies. He knew everything about them. He was obsessed with them, a maniac. I thought I was mad about them, but there's always someone even crazier. I couldn't compete with him. It was like he'd seen every film ever made. I tried to beat him at his own game, but it was no good. You've heard the term living encyclopedia, right? Well, that's exactly what he was. So this Tokita-kun, with his massive love of film, found it regrettable that our school had no film club. Of course, his dream for the future was to become a film director. So, he made a movie himself. We were first graders at the time. Despite that, he went and approached our seniors and teachers all by himself and gathered like-minded individuals. Of course, they couldn't just become a club right away. If you look for people who enjoy film, you'll find quite a few of them. Somehow, he gathered around 20 or so people. He was extremely happy. He brought most of the equipment they needed to film. Although, by equipment, that means pretty much just an 8mm camera and some simple lights. And by 8mm camera, I don't mean the cameras everyone uses now. It was an old handheld type. You don't see them a lot these days. Still, everyone he had gathered was real excited about it. It would be just like making a real movie. They felt somewhat like professionals. Eh? And me? Did I take part in his movie? No, I didn't. I joined the soccer club. You don't think I'm a good fit for soccer? Well, we can talk about that some other time. Anyway, how about you? Are you interested in film studies? I am. Really? You're interested? Then what would you like to do? There are lots of different jobs on a film. Acting. I knew it. You want to stand out, don't you? When you think of actors, they always stand out, make a big show. They're dazzling, right? And they're popular. But it's tough work. You're in front of people, so people can see whether you're good or not. The actors I find amazing are the ones who can take on any role and make it their own. Well, that's an actor's job, isn't it? But Tokita-kun wanted to be the director. This was unanimous. Everyone else wanted to be actors, and Tokita-kun was the one who put it all together, after all. And he was the one who had the equipment. Even his seniors happily agreed with that. Then they started filming their all-important, memorable first film. It was right around this time last year. You like horror and science fiction films, right? Actually, so did he. The film he wanted to make was called Mummy and the Beautiful Girl. Don't laugh at it. He didn't want to make a film chock full of special effects like those made today, but something more akin to the monster movies of old. Even if he did want to film some flashy special effects, well, it wasn't like he'd be able to. So he didn't focus on that, and instead went for simple costumes and makeup for a cheap-looking monster, and threw himself into making dark atmosphere seem real instead. He really put his all into it. But while everyone else was also motivated at first, slowly they became fed up. He only did what he wanted, and didn't want to try anything that didn't interest him or seemed difficult. Most of them were only there for a bit of fun, after all. Still, a few of the others who shared his vision helped him out the best they could, from small chores right up to the actors. I cheered for him on the inside. And what was the movie about? Tokita-kun wrote the script as well. It was a simple story. A mummy brought over from Egypt came back to life, and he was looking for the reborn princess he once served. Then in the end, she became a mummy as well, and together they climbed into his casket and returned to Egypt. Simple, right? Well, the actors were stiff as boards. They were students. Most of the movie was set inside the school, so even the heroine of the film wore our school's uniform. She was the reborn Egyptian princess. A strange setting, right? Still, somehow they were able to finish filming. But after that was when things took a turn for the worse. You might be thinking that once filming is done, a movie is made, but that's a big mistake. Whether a movie is good or not depends on the editing done after. They had to gather all the film they'd taken and then put it all together into one coherent whole. That's what makes a finished movie. You need a lot of patience for that type of work. For those who enjoy that type of work, it's undoubtedly a lot of fun though. It was for Tokita-kun. He worked hard at it, losing track of time. Huh? That's strange. Did I film this? He looked at some tape and tilted his head. It was a scene with the male mummy. It was a scene of the mummy walking around, looking for his reborn princess. He did film something similar to that, sure, but it was different to both his memories and the storyboards. You need to make storyboards before you can start filming a movie. Then you use those to start filming scenes. If you don't, then you won't know what's what by the end of filming, nor will you be able to film efficiently in such a limited time. The film I shot was of the mummy in the distance, from far away. So why is this a close-up? His eyes were inexplicably drawn to the film. He could clearly see the mummy's face in the film. Not only that, but it looked even more real and grotesque than the makeup he had done. Even Tokita-kun, who was well versed in horror films, felt a chill run down his spine as he looked at it. That's how well it was filmed. He had no memory of that particular cut, but perhaps his memories were wrong. There was no way he couldn't use such a great scene. He edited it in. But when he looked at the film the next day, he found even more scenes he had no memory of shooting. The running time of the film was several times longer than what they had actually filmed. There was an incredible amount of film. The scene featured a detective who was investigating a serial killer being murdered by the mummy. Of course, the person playing the detective was one of the club members. The scene of him being killed was simple. The detective ran from the attacking mummy. The mummy reached his hands out towards the detective's neck, and then the scene went black. Then, the detective screamed. After that, it showed a close-up of the mummy's bloody hand. However, the film clearly showed the detective's death. It was incredibly realistic. You see, the detective didn't have a whole lot of screen time. The person playing the detective was so terrible at acting that they couldn't give him much more screen time. Yet, his acting was so true to life. His face contorted in pain as the mummy squeezed his neck. Then, a single drop of blood fell from his mouth. He fell to the ground and stopped moving. One after the other, the cuts played on the film. No matter how he looked at it, he had no memory of filming such a scene. But it was really well done. Sighing, he edited the scene into the film. The next day, the student who played the detective was killed. He was strangled. When Tokita-kun heard it, he couldn't believe his ears. It sounded just like that scene. Apparently, they didn't know who killed him. After all, he was alone, asleep in his room all night. There was no evidence of a break-in, nor was his room in a mess. They suspected his family. Tokita-kun grew fearful. Perhaps the student died because he happened to watch that film. Perhaps it was the mummy's curse. What do you think? Would you continue editing the film? If you continued, perhaps you would see something strange again. Continue editing. Aren't you just cruel? If that's what you're really like, then I don't know what's going to happen to you in the future. But Tokita-kun was the same. He loved films more than life itself. Perhaps his film would go down in history as a work of art. With that in mind, he forged on ahead with editing. Then, that very same day, he saw something even more strange in the film. This time, it was the scene of the reborn princess being sealed in the casket. The scene involved the princess seeing the mummy, becoming so terrified that she passed out, and then being sealed in the casket. But what do you know? The scene on the film was so terrible that it made him want to avert his eyes. The mummy was hugging her so tightly that it was like her insides were going to burst out. Then, of all things, he started to tear her limbs off, one by one, cleanly, while she was still alive. Her blood-covered body writhed in pain, violently trying to escape from the mummy. But it was no good. The mummy tore off each of her limbs and threw them in the casket. Finally, he twisted her head off and casually threw the remains of her torso into the casket as well. Then, he rubbed his face against hers, holding her head close. That was where the film ended. Tokita-kun gazed at the scene before him, dumbfounded. There are lots of different types of horror films, and those with lots of blood are called splatter films. The scene burned into the back of Tokita-kun's brain couldn't be expressed in such a half-hearted way. I've never seen anything like this. It was supposed to be something he filmed himself, yet it was strange. The film seemed to be standing on its own. With that in mind, Tokita-kun watched the scene over and over. No matter how many times he saw it, that freshness never wore away. And each time he watched it, he was assaulted by a new fear. The acting was so real, like nothing he'd ever seen in a movie before. Not to mention the amazing makeup. Of course, he used that scene for the climax of the film. And of course, he didn't think that such a cruel scene would ever allow the film to be shown at school. But still, he was satisfied. He believed that selling his own independent film to anyone at all would mean that it was a success. Then, the following day. You already know what happened, don't you? The girl who played the heroine was found brutally murdered. She'd been torn to pieces. He didn't hear the full details, but of course Tokita-kun knew what happened. What the body looked like, and how she was killed. The proof was all there in that tape. I remember it happened that day after school. Tokita-kun came to me, telling me just how real and amazing his film was. I'm making an amazing film right now. No doubt about it. This is a work of art. It'll be remembered in the annals of history. You like movies, right? If you want, I can show just a little of the final product. Then he told me about the film. I happily followed him. I was excited. How about you? If you received such an invite, would you be excited to see it? Or would you laugh out your nose because, at the end of the day, it's just a home movie? I'd look forward to it. Right? Nobody could stay quiet after hearing what he had to say. If you really do love movies, anyway. The film club were allowed to use the audio-visual room after school. They weren't yet a real club, so they didn't have a room for themselves. He started playback of the film with well-versed hands. Just for you, today I'm going to show you a new scene that I haven't edited yet. The climax is perfection, but you can look forward to that once the film is finished. Then he took one film out of the giant pile. I haven't edited this yet. Shall we watch this one today? It's a strange feeling, watching a film that hasn't been fully put together yet. It was my first time seeing such a thing. It was a new feeling. The clapperboard filled the screen, and then the performance began. Several takes were no good, and the same scene repeated over and over. It was interesting. For some reason, Tokita-kun suddenly screamed. What's wrong? I didn't know what happened and, without realizing, repeated myself. I'm in the scene. I need to stop it. I need to stop it, quickly. I had no idea what he was panicking about. He freaked and desperately tried to stop the machine. Even though he was familiar with it, his hands shook and he didn't appear to handle it very well. It won't stop. The machine won't stop. His face turned pale. Surprised, I compared his face to that on screen. Tokita-kun was on screen with the mummy. That's amazing. The mummy looks great. That was what I really thought. It looked like the real thing, not a fake. It's gonna kill me! If we don't stop it quickly, the mummy is gonna kill me. Everybody dies. Everyone he attacks in the film actually dies. Tokita-kun screamed, his voice trembling. Honestly, I didn't understand him. Then it happened. He told me all about the movie's secrets. If you heard all that, would you believe it? It might be cruel, but I didn't believe him at all. How on earth could people die just like they did in the film? On the screen, Tokita-kun shuddered in fear. Just like the real Tokita-kun right in front of me. Finally, he pulled the plug. Then, what do you know? The machine kept playing, even though it was unplugged. He held his head in his hands and fell to the ground, just like he did on screen at the same time. He was the only one who knew what happened in the scene. I thought he was trying to scare me, so I did my best to remain calm. But that's when it happened. Hands covered in bandages suddenly reached out of the darkness and tightened around Tokita-kun's neck. I couldn't do anything. I was so shocked that all I could do was stand there. Then, following the bandaged hand that appeared from the darkness, the bandaged face of a mummy followed it. The eye that peeked out of the haphazard bandages looked just like that of a dead fish, lifeless. Tokita-kun's final screams echoed throughout the audio-visual room. The mummy grabbed his head and then crushed it. He crushed it as though he were crushing a mandarin. Completely changed, Tokita-kun's remains looked just like a broken watermelon. Even though his head had been crushed, Tokita-kun's body continued to convulse. I couldn't do anything and just stood there. When I finally came back to, the mummy was gone. It was like it melted back into the darkness. Tokita-kun's body was all that remained. Then his body appeared on screen, exactly as how he had just died, and the scene stopped. I ran. I ran all the way home. Nobody would believe me if I told them what happened. I decided to act like I hadn't seen or heard anything. Hey, Kurata-san, do you want to see that film? I do. Really? Yeah, I guess you would. You do like horror films, after all. You're probably thinking that you'd love to see what amazing images have been captured. Tokita-kun's death became the talk of the school, but the numerous rolls of film that were in the audio-visual room disappeared, like they never existed at all. When he died, the film club was dismantled as well. None of the members knew anything about those films. Just what was that movie, huh? If that movie exists finished somewhere, I sure would love to see it though. By the way, I brought one of those film rolls from that time. Without realizing it, I'd taken one of them home. Or perhaps someone had snuck it into my pocket. It's the film of Tokita-kun's death. That's right. It's the same film I saw in the audio-visual room. Do you want to see it? I'd love to. Really? Well, just for you, I'll show it to you. There's probably a reason for why we met like this. But I can't guarantee your safety. Tokita-kun was killed because of his association with the film, after all. To be honest, this film is even more terrifying than the finished product. Although you might not think so. I'll ask you one more time. Do you want to see the film I've brought here today? I do. If you believed my story, you wouldn't have answered that way. I don't know what you're thinking, but if you really want to see it, then I'll show you. But there is one condition. You must come with me alone to see it. Okay? Okay. Well then, let's go to the audio-visual room. The halls are scary when the lights are off, huh? The teacher on night watch has probably gone home already. Kurata-san, whatever happens now, there are no adults that can save you. The word daredevil was invented just for people like you, huh? Alright, we're here. Hang on a minute. I've hidden the tape so no one can find it. I'll bring it now. Please turn the other way for a moment. I don't want you to know where it is either. Sorry to keep you waiting. So, the tape is ready. Go ahead and watch it. Sorry, I can't show it to you for too long. To be honest, this wasn't what was on the tape at first. When I first got it, I went out and bought a machine to play back 8mm film and watched it at home. It was right there on the film, the scene of Tokita-kun's death. But how can I put it? When I watched it again a short while later, Tokita-kun's dead body was rotting. It was like time was passing the same as reality, like the world inside the film really exists. After that, I started to watch it at regular intervals. It's like I'm observing it. After several months passed, Tokita-kun turned into nothing but bones. Then, before I knew it, he disappeared from the screen. Even his bones disappeared, like they'd been weathered away or someone cleaned them up. Not a single one was left. Only the audio-visual room was left. But looking closely, that wasn't it at all. It wasn't true that nobody was there. Somebody was standing next to where Tokita-kun's body had been, staring off into space. It was me. It was like playing back that time. And then, behind me, the creepy bandaged hand that appeared to be reaching out of the darkness towards me. Just like you saw right now. I panicked and turned the projector off. I wondered what I would do if it didn't turn off, but thankfully it did. That's why I'm still alive right now. The fact that the projector turned off today as well saved me. Recently, I've started to think that my death has been captured in this tape too. Tokita-kun was the same, and I love movies as well. My death scene will soon appear on this tape as well. And I can't help but think that someday an amazing film is finally going to be completed. Kurata-san, you like horror movies, right? I started to think while you were talking. Once this tape has killed me, you're the only other person left. That's why I showed it to you, and only you. It doesn't appear to be your time just yet though. But when the time does come, I'll make sure to let you know. We should probably get back to the newspaper club room now. Everyone's waiting for us. Kurata-san, I'm sorry, but could you go back first? I'll return after I've hidden the tape. I found something strange hidden in the same place before that caught my attention. Someone has probably discovered its location. I need to check it out for a bit. Arai-san seemed to push me out of the room. My footsteps echoed in the empty hall. What a horrid story I heard. I should get back to the club room quickly. I want to finish this as quick as I can. I shouldn't have said that I wanted to see the tape. Even so, just what was that? Too many strange things are going on. Go back to the room first. Everyone keeps saying that. Why? It was fine at first. Kazuma-san's story just seemed like a joke. Like, is this what the 7 school mysteries really are? I returned to the clubroom alone. Sorry to keep you waiting. Arai-san said he'd be back soon. Let's have a quick break and then move on with the next story. Again? Everyone's taking too much time to tell their stories. It's completely dark out now. A cute girl with a bob cut complained. She'll be the last storyteller if the 7th person doesn't show up. Whatever. Hey, you said you're Emi-chan, right? I'm also a first grader. Nice to meet you. Her carefree smile set me at ease. Before long, Arai-san returned. He seemed somewhat pale. Arai-san, are you okay? I asked him, but he just replied, yeah. Is he really okay? Well, thinking about it isn't going to change anything. I have to listen to the next story. I silently turned to look at the final storyteller.